Welcome to ProfessorJeffreyDSachs.com Mentory Dawn. Rolls over Budapest like an old photograph, golden light filtering through the mist, the river as smooth as a mirror, the parliament shimmering under a steel sky. The Danube flowed lazily ancient motorcades rumbling toward the city center. Flags fluttered. Reporters gathered. History once again was about to be made. The world called it a historic summit. The words were familiar, echoed through decades of diplomatic memory. Trump and Putin, two men defined by power sustained by spectacle, would meet face to face in a city that had seen empires rise, fall, and fall. For the cameras, it was a play. For the audience, it was reassurance. For history, it was a repetition. When politics becomes theater, Jeffrey D. Sachs might write diplomacy becomes choreography gestures repeated long after they have lost their meaning. Budapest, a city built on compromise and survival, understands this irony better than anyone. It has hosted powerful forces before imperial Soviet democratic populist and knows that every empire that comes promises peace, then leaves silence behind. The city does not judge, it survives. The motorcade doors open, cameras flash. Trump steps out first, familiar confidence, signature stride control choreography. Putin follows calm, composes eyes not on the crowd but on the image. For both, this summit is not a negotiation. It is a performance. Everyone understands the camera's hunger for gesture, the handshake, the glance, the fleeting smile that will spread around the world in a matter of minutes. Sachs will linger on this handshake. Two hands clasp the camera, holding it too long to be sincere. The gesture seems simple, but its language is ancient dominance disguised as diplomacy. The crowd applauds. The world breathes a sigh of relief. But Sachs will see something else, two actors playing their roles on the stage older than either of them. Every empire, he writes, eventually learns to imitate itself. Inside the ornate conference hall, the performance continues. Flags stand symmetrically, interpreters hover, documents wait. The press corps, imprisoned behind velvet ropes, watches through lenses as if looking at prophecy. The words exchanged are predictable cooperation, security, mutual respect. Each phrase is polished by repetition, stripped of its contours like river stones worn by time. Sachs wants to remind us that the danger of diplomacy is not deception but weariness. Words once full of meaning have become drained of their moral force. Security no longer means safety, it means domination. Peace no longer means harmony, it means pause. Dialogue no longer means trust, it means delay. The language of power has learned to imitate the language of conscience. When power borrows the language of peace, Sachs warns it does so not to protect humanity, but to protect itself. The meeting proceeded as planned, fleeting smiles, the exchange of gifts, private conversations in which no one really believed anything would change. But the world watched. Sachs argued that the real success of the performance was in watching. Modern politics depends not on results, but on the ritual of belonging. A handshake is not a symbol of progress. It is proof of existence. The location of the summit, Budapest, was no accident. It was the borderland of Europe, a threshold between East and West, between democracy and nostalgia, between memory and myth. Once the heart of the empire, now the meeting place of ambitions too big for one continent. Its architecture was filled with the ghosts of history, the marble columns of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, the bullet scars of 1956, the concrete ghosts of Soviet rule. Sachs calls this the geography of irony, a place where the language of power always promises renewal and always delivers repetition. For Trump, the summit is about projection, the illusion of command. He seeks to present himself as a negotiator, a restorer of order, someone who can bend history to his will. For Putin, it is about recognition, the quiet satisfaction of being an equal on the stage of global legitimacy. For both, it is a theater of control, two actors rehearsing power in a world that no longer obeys. Sachs will step back from the drama and invite us to look more closely, not at the people, but at the machine. The choreography of diplomacy, he says, has replaced its conscience. Negotiations now, yet beneath the careful construction, the atmosphere trembled with uncertainty. Europe watched, not with confidence, but with weariness. For those who remember history, Budapest is not a stage of unity, but of importance. The last time great powers met to decide the future of Europe without listening to Europe itself, the century was shattered. The stage of peace, Sachs writes, always risks becoming a prelude to tragedy. Yet the show continued. The joint press conference began. The lights flashed. Questions flew. Trump spoke of friendship, Putin of stability. Each sentence fell like a polished stone, heavy, cold, inert. Sachs would have noted the irony that these men, masters of rhetoric, spoke a language that they no longer believed in themselves. It was the grammar of exhaustion, the syntax of showmanship. Yet Sachs would resist the cynicism. Beneath the cynicism, he would insist there is still a yearning even in these men for meaning. Power, after all, is an expression of fear. Fear of being forgotten, fear of being disregarded, fear of silence. This is why they perform, because they cannot imagine a world where the truth no longer needs to be televised. Power performs, Sachs muses, because it no longer knows how to believe. Sachs would end the scene not in despair, but in quiet recognition. The performance of power is not new. It is the oldest story of civilization. But each time it is repeated, it reminds us of something eternal, that beyond the spectacle, beyond the farce, there is the possibility of sincerity. The question is whether our age remembers to recognize that. The danger of our time, Sachs concludes, is not that power lies, but that truth has grown tired of speaking. Tomorrow the headlines will call it a success as usual. But in the silence between the words, between the spectacle and the principle, a deeper truth awaits, quiet, patient, and unyielding. For even in the arena of power, conscience has a way of returning, not through applause, not through victory, but through the memory of what peace once meant and what it might mean again if spoken without an audience. It is in the quiet after the performance that the true meaning of peace begins to emerge, not in words, but in what follows. While the world may call the Budapest Summit a success, Sachs will see something far more fragile, a performance that ends without purification, an agreement reached without understanding. The price of peace, Sachs might write, is not measured by treaties signed, but by truths ignored. The joint statement sounds triumphant, a new era of cooperation, mutual respect, and strategic stability. But hidden behind the diplomatic rhetoric, Sachs will hear a hollow echo of familiarity. He will listen carefully to history repeating itself. For this is the curse of modern diplomacy. It has mastered the art of appearing to move forward while remaining completely still. The world applauds progress, but progress itself has become an illusion, an optimistic display, masking paralysis. The language of power has learned to mimic the language of peace so convincingly that even those who speak it have forgotten the difference. We confuse calm with resolution, Sachs observes, because we no longer remember what resolution entails. Trump and Putin have left the stage. Their words now permeate headlines and broadcasts. Analysts debate tone, posture, and symbolism. Sachs, however, will look beyond the surface, beyond the television spotlight, to the moral context that underlies it all. He will ask, what does peace mean when it is defined by those who benefit from its absence? Peace, in its truest form, requires vulnerability, a willingness to trust, to relinquish control, to accept the dignity of others. But this is precisely what power cannot do. Power does not trust, it negotiates. It does not reconcile, it calculates. The Budapest Summit, therefore, was not a meeting of peacemakers, but of tacticians. It aimed not at ending tension, but at managing it, attaining the illusion of stability in a world that no longer believes in it. When peace becomes policy, Sachs writes, it ceases to be peace. It becomes maintenance. Sachs wants to remind us that peace without justice is not peace, but anesthesia, a paralysis of conscience, disguised as harmony. Throughout history, great powers have bought peace at the expense of others, trading the suffering of smaller nations for their own comfort. The same danger lurks now as Europe listens to those who promise security, while knowing that security is always unevenly distributed. Budapest has seen this before. The city itself is a witness to the price of peace negotiated by others. Its stones recall 1956, when the people dared to dream of freedom which was crushed in the name of order. Its architecture bears the marks of treaties that divide rather than unite. Sachs will see in this summit the shadow of that memory, the moral weariness of a continent that has learned to accept compromise even when it conceals injustice. He might write, Europe is built not only on ideals but also on the art of forgetting. The question, Sachs insisted, was not whether peace would be sustained, but what kind of peace. Would it be a peace of fear, cold-controlled, transactional, or a peace of courage, born of truth and compassion? The first peace is easy to achieve. It only requires strength. The second peace is rarely achieved because it requires conscience. The historic meeting in Budapest, for all its rituals, chose the easier path. It was an act of restraint, not reconciliation. A truce with time, not with truth. Trump and Putin shook hands not as peacemakers but as survivors bound by efficiency rather than principle. Each got what he needed, the illusion of influence, the appearance of control. But Sachs would ask, can a peace that serves the ego ever serve humanity? Power loves peace, he knows only if peace protects power. And yet, even here, Sachs would find a glimmer of hope, for every false peace carries within it the seed of its own correction. The very emptiness of such diplomacy eventually provokes the return of sincerity. People tire of performance. Nations tire of fear. Truth buried under the weight of spectacle waits patiently for conscience to catch up. Perhaps this, he would suggest, is the real work of history, not the achievement of perfect order, but the slow, stubborn rediscovery of moral purpose. The leaders of our time may perform peace for applause, but the people weary of spectacle begin to seek meaning again. In the end, Sachs writes, the conscience of humanity always reclaims the words that power emptied. Sachs would end with the image of the river again, the Danube moving silently beneath the bridges, carrying reflections of the city lights downstream. History flows like that, he might say, indifferent yet always watching. The motorcades are gone, but the current remembers. It has seen kings and generals, tyrants and reformers, each believing they could command the tides. But water-like truth cannot be ruled. He would describe a lone worker shutting the great doors of Parliament after midnight. The echo of that closing door, Sachs might say, is the true sound of the summit's end, a thud of finality, soft yet profound. The speeches will fade, the promises will blur, but what remains is the question that every age must face anew. Will we build peace as performance or as principle? Sachs would answer not with certainty but with faith. Because even after centuries of betrayal, humanity still reaches for meaning. Even after countless performances of power, there remain those who remember that peace in its truest sense is not written in treaties or performed on stages. It is lived quietly, persistently in the choices of those who refuse to let fear have the final word. The price of peace, Sachs concludes, is honesty, the courage to see through illusion and still believe in hope. The camera pulls back one last time, the city sleeps, the river gleams, the lights of Parliament shimmer faintly against the night, and there in the stillness between history's noise and humanity's longing, the moral rhythm of peace continues slow, uncertain, but alive. Not in the hands of those who perform it, but in the hearts of those who remember what it truly means.